Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Support characters in P5X are deceptively important. Yes, Chord is a great character, but without reaching the right stat breakpoint or having the correct skills leveled, your DPS unit scores in SOS and Nightmare Gateway can suffer quite a bit. Chord is a bit of an obvious character to review, but we're going to go over the two main types of support, strategists and saboteurs. Healers can be a little bit different, so we're not going to talk about them today, but we'll review two from each side, including Chord and Leo, who are strategists, as well as Rin and Vino, who are saboteurs. The overall goal with this video is to provide you with a good template to build support characters now and in the future by reviewing four fairly different ones, why they're worth investing materials in, as well as to show what they're actually bringing to the table for your DPS's output. If you know how to build a character like Leo, for example, don't skip his part, because I'm using each of these characters to mention general advice that's hopefully useful across the board for support character building. The first character we'll be looking at today is Vino, so let's get started. Outside of Chord, Vino is one of the strongest supports in the game right now. For a standard character, her potential with the Queen team is insane and downright mandatory. I picked Vino first because I feel like she's a commonly misunderstood character when it comes to what she actually wants out of her stats. And this isn't going to be like my regular DPS unit build guide video where I break down absolutely everything, so we're just going to talk about the essentials. For most supports, it's as simple as looking at either their skills or their passives. Vino most often uses her skills 1 and 3, with skill 1 dealing nuke damage to one foe equal to 174% of her attack stat. Despite this being the first line of the attack, the most important part actually comes later. When using skill 1, the target's defense down is lowered by a value equal to 22% of Vino's ailment accuracy stat, up to a 38% defense down cap at skill level 11. It also inflicts a guaranteed ailment, which helps Queen set up her rotation. This effect, the debuff, will always proc, so it can lead towards you believing a rotation is working as expected, only for the numbers to not be great. As for another example, we can look at Bullseye Bomber, her skill 3. Widely considered her best move, it deals nuke damage while also increasing target damage taken for 2 turns based on the elemental ailments they have. This damage increase scales based on Vino's ailment accuracy, but also based on how high the skill is leveled. This means if you're not using ailment accuracy on her Star Revelation card main stat, you're leaving Queen damage on the table. What's even more confusing is how the ailment accuracy stat is calculated by the game. Despite it being called accuracy, its breakpoint varies on each character, and for Vino, the magic number is 173%. Of course, this would be with all level 12 skills since they have a higher limit of ailment accuracy and debuffing. Even though it's a really high number, the number listed in the core attribute goals you see here, 140%, is a perfectly fine value to have on her, and one that can still score some crazy Queen damage. What's nice with Vino's stat building is that you can ignore almost every other stat and focus your Revelations card substats on just ailment accuracy. Attack is nice for her to have, but since she's not doing a crazy amount of damage, it might even be better to get some HP or defense since she's one of the more squishy party members. Honestly, those are really the main things important on Vino to make her a great team player, but if you wanted to go the extra mile, I would get her 5-star weapon. It's not nearly as much of an investment since she's a 4-star character, and it can help bridge the gap in her ailment accuracy since the breakpoint's kind of tough to hit. Generally, all the supports we talk about today benefit pretty heavily from their 5-star, so I'll try not to mention it too much, but I had to mention it with Vino. Another minor thing that's not as important is limit breaking their weapon past 70. Since the buffs to attack and HP start to get less and less worth it, if you have the materials and just want their P level badge to go up, a little bit, that could make a difference, but other than that, it's not a huge deal. So now we're going to talk about Rin. Rin is our next saboteur, and even though she fills the same role as Vino, she functions a lot differently. For one thing, she's more of a spread debuffer, which the game doesn't really make a distinction between. Despite Vino and Rin both having a single spread and a single target move respectively, they are both their least popular moves. The big difference between these two is the big focus on attack with Rin. Her first passive, Kung Fu Mastery, increases attack by 1% for every 2 points of speed she has. Her attacks, similar to Vino's, deal a debuff that depends on the stat of Rin's speed as well. Ren's preferred stat is something they point you towards a lot more than Vino's since it's all over her kit. Something that's great about that is she's almost guaranteed first to go in your rotation. The reason this is a good thing is because if you have characters like Chord or Wonder that do attacks to enemies after her turn, you get a little bit more bonus damage from them after she does her debuffs. Speed requirements are all over this character's moves, but the magic number for her speed is around 180, and that's the in-game number, which we're going to make the distinction between in just a second here. And just to be clear, 180 speed is the maxed out value for her debuffs, once her skills are at their max levels. 150 speed, like the recommended stat, is a fine place to stop too. The other thing about this Thief menu stat screen here is that it doesn't take into account in-game stats, which are affected by things like your Navi's passives, which you get 15 to 20% of passed onto your team. It doesn't take into account turn 1 or automatic effects that your party members give characters to buff their stats, and it also doesn't take into account Thieves' Den buffs, which are pretty minimal, but over time they'll add up, especially as people get their Q levels up. So real quick, because I feel like it's important, I'm going to show you how to access the in-game stat screen. So to access the screen, all you need to do is either hold left click on one of your units icons, or you can go into the little magnifying glass at the top here and you can click on Allies and access it from there as well. One of the best characters to demonstrate this with is Mesa, because his stats are completely different depending on which mode you're in. With Mesa, you can watch as his pierce rate goes from 18%, and then when you switch modes to nearly 40%. This is something I've been wanting to bring up for a while because it's useful, and I think it's a great tool for testing your stats. Back to Ren's stats. Naturally, speed is a most wanted stat on her, as well as some attack actually, since she does a pretty decent amount of damage if she's built correctly, and you start to see a lot more mileage the more enemies there are. Ren and Vino both benefit pretty heavily from being in the first slot too, which might require a bit of speed tuning for Vino, but we'll get into speed tuning later. The last thing I want to talk about for both Saboteurs is their Revelations card sets. Support card sets are interesting because they're less about the character in particular and more about what they bring to the team. The most popular set you'll see on debuffers is Departure Control and Departure Prosperity. This is because the space card Departure is based on attacking enemies, which is more of a debuffer focus. The actual card set effect decreases main target defense by 23% for 2 turns, every time the enemy is attacked. Departure Prosperity increases the party's damage by 8% for 1 turn after attacking a foe. We'll delve more into Prosperity when we talk about strategists, but for debuffers, Departure Control is going to be the main benefit they bring to the table when talking about Revelations cards. Now, we're going to swap over to the strategists. Leon is our first strategist, and probably one of the most simple supports in the game. What's awesome is he's also one of the easiest to build as well as a standard character. The only stat Leon cares about is attack, and his breakpoint for that stat in combat is about 4,000, but going over or under a bit isn't going to hurt him too much. Leo doesn't care where in the rotation you are, what's going on with the boss, anything like that. He's doing skill 2 and then skill 3, just like that, over and over. His moves may look pretty interesting and complex, but the long and short of it is, when he's on his skill 3, he buffs your DPS's attack by a lot. The biggest issue with Leo is his speed, which normally is pretty low until you put some speed on there with substats. This is why I've chosen this part of the video to explain speed tuning. Speed is something I've talked about before, and I've referenced it a little in some of my other P5X videos, but now we're going to dive headfirst into it. Speed as a stat determines who's going first in your party, but it also affects the likelihood of characters dodging attacks. Or, if you have 2 characters going the exact same speed, the game will choose the manual turn order you've picked in the ready screen, or in the party screen. Tuning speeds for certain characters like Joker can be really annoying since, for some reason, he has a very high base speed despite being a DPS. Controlling your DPS speed is the most important because having a support go after them means they wait an entire turn to actually use the effects given. Wonder's speed is pretty easy to fix, and I'll show you how now. Wonder's default speed is 100, and can be manipulated by using the persona trait Agility Master. There's 4 different versions of this skill, but most of the time you'll only need 1, 2, or 3. Agility Boost 2 brings his speed up to about 109, which should be faster than your DPS, one of your supports, and maybe even your other character. Another note I'd like to make is that Agility Master 3 and 4 also lower Wonder's defense, so that's another good reason not to use them. They kind of take you really high above what you usually need anyway, so you can just stay away from those. Back to Leo. One thing that is nice about his speed tuning is it doesn't really matter where he is. If Wonder plans on buffing the team's attack, then it would be ideal for him to go after Wonder so he gets that attack buff, but in the grand scheme of things, he just needs to be before the DPS. This is a common theme of strategists, having them go right before a DPS, but Chord is a weird one, so let's talk about her next. Chord is a character that doesn't need much explanation. If you're watching this, you know who she is, what she does, all that. Just like Leon, her second most important move, Unison Notes, scales off of attack. If you're wondering, the magic breakpoint number for a lot of her moves to cap out on attack is around 5300, but it doesn't hurt for her to just be over or under that. Catchy Hook, her claim to fame, actually scales off of nothing, just the skill level. There's not a whole lot I can tell you about Chord that you don't already know, but one thing that's good to mention is her speed. Chord wants to be just a bit faster than your DPS in the third slot. This is because of Catchy Hook. Wonder and the first party member need time to apply their buffs, debuffs, traits, whatever it is they're trying to do for your DPS. If Chord goes third, that means she can use Catchy Hook, and everything you've applied to both of them can be used when Chord makes the DPS use their highlight. There also just isn't really an advantage for her going first or second. The last thing I want to mention involves ideal revelations card sets for strategists. Because strategists don't attack very often, you'll find that their sets revolve more around general team buffs and things that apply when the battle starts. The most popular space card on strategists is going to be Trust, which increases damage of party members every time the support uses moves on an ally for 2 turns. It might sound familiar because of the Trust Prosperity effect, which immediately sets the highlight gauge at 25% at the beginning of a battle. If you've watched any strategy video or SOS guides, you've heard of this set, and generally, you'll want to have at least one party member with this set on each of your teams. You'll see this a lot on Leon or Chord. Sometimes you'll see people running 2 of these sets at once, which isn't exactly ideal, but the Trust Prosperity bonus, which increases party damage by 8% for 2 turns, does stack, so you can apply it twice. The highlight bonus does not stack. One thing that's interesting is Chord's weapon, her 5-star, does stack with Trust Prosperity. This means if you have a Chord at R5 on her weapon with this set, you just start with a highlight. Sometimes this gives you more wiggle room with build guides and lets you activate an extra buff free of charge in Nightmare Gateway or SOS. For now, that's all I really have to say as far as general tips on support characters go. I could get more specific, but I don't want this video to age too poorly since this game's meta shifts a lot, so just tried to stick on general good tips. In the future, we'll get different support revelation card sets like Creation and Reconciliation, and things like that will shake things up a bit. I just wanted to make this video to get some tips out there for support characters since a lot of the focus is for the characters that do the big numbers. As always, if you have suggestions for videos for us or things you want to ask, feel free to drop them in comments. Likes and subscriptions are always welcome as well. We definitely appreciate how much traction the channel's been getting so quickly, and we've been trying to respond with more quality content. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you again real soon.